Dr. Sam Nujoma, a former liberation hero, was born on the 11th of May 1929 at Itunda village in the northwestern part of Namibia. At the age of 17, he moved to the harbour town of Walvis Bay in the north of the country. It was there that he was introduced to Herero tribal chief Hosea Kutako, who was lobbying to end apartheid rule in Namibia. Kutako became the mentor, guiding him as he became political activist in the black workers' community near Windhoek. In 1960, Nujoma visited the United States of America and petitioned the United Nations to end South Africa's colonial administration in the Southwest Africa. It is during the same year that he went into exile. In 1989, Nujoma led the signing of a historic ceasefire agreement with South Africa, resulting in the implementation of the United Nations Security Council Resolution 435. In September 1989, Nujoma made a historic return to his homeland and was received with much joy and excitement by thousands of Namibians who lined the streets to welcome a man they refer to as a brave fighter who led the freedom struggle. On arrival, Nujoma criticized the then apartheid South African military forces for still carrying out assassinations of his SWAPO leaders and activists in violation of the UN-sponsored ceasefire resolution.
And they are cowards, as a matter of fact. When the war was on, where were they? In this country, there is a terror campaign, well organized by the South African government. It's daily being carried out.
In his first address back home as SWAPO leader, Nujoma emphasized his party's commitment to reconciliation with the former apartheid oppressors.
SWAPO has committed itself to a policy of genuine national.
In 1990, Nujoma became the country's first president elected by the Constituency Assembly. Delivering his Independence Day speech, he acknowledged the pain and suffering that Namibians had experienced during their decades-long liberation struggle.
Our nation is finally free and independent. Come on a silver platter. We fought and sacrificed for it. Namibia is achieving nationhood with a proud history of martyrdom.
On regional issues, Nujoma was a close ally of the then Zimbabwean President Robert Mugabe. He praised the radical land reform policy of the Zimbabwean leader, sparking fears that he would attempt to emulate him by forcing Namibia's white farmers off their land.
The British colonial settlers in Zimbabwe today.
It was during the UN World Conference on Sustainable Development held in Johannesburg in 2002 that Nujoma used his speech to criticize the then British Prime Minister Tony Blair for lobbying that the sanctions must be imposed on Zimbabwe.
Here in Southern Africa, we have one problem created by the British. The Honorable Tony Blair is here. And they created a situation in Zimbabwe. And he went and campaigned successfully to European Union to impose sanctions against Zimbabwe, as well as North America. The British colonial settlers in Zimbabwe today, they own 70–80% of the land in Zimbabwe. And Zimbabwe is a tiny country. And it has 14 million indigenous who have no land. And the whole land is occupied by more than 100,000 British settler colonialists. This situation must be, this summit must make money available, especially the European Union, who have imposed sanctions against Zimbabwe, must be lifted immediately. Otherwise, it's useless to come here and tell us all things that are not right.
As a strong proponent of Africa's socio-economic renewal, Nujoma was amongst those who actively supported the Africa Renewal Initiative, NEPAD, which was led by some African leaders, including former President Thabo Mbeki.
The people in the SADC region and the African Union, that means our continent as a whole, to deepen roots of democratic exercise.
President Nujoma.
He was indeed a...
Mbeki also paid tribute to a leader with whom he worked closely during the anti-apartheid struggle and in the democratic dispensation.
President Nujoma was one of our leaders. I mean, one of our leaders in a real sense of that word, because we didn't treat him as a leader belonging to another organization. He was one of our own leaders, President Nujoma, because of the relationship between SWAPO and the ANC. President Nujoma was to us one of our leaders, not a leader of SWAPO, but a leader of our own struggle. That's the connection between the two organizations, because we both had one oppressor, which was the apartheid regime, and therefore this common struggle for liberation was a common struggle to defeat the same enemy.
From his time as a liberation warrior, one of Nujoma's key objectives was to see Africa overcome the impact of the Cold War era, which resulted in African countries divided along the Western and the Soviet political and socio-economic ideologies.
What I want is peace. I wish to see peace in Africa, peace in the world, so that since Cold War ended, I had the hope that Africa is now liberated, and we should now concentrate all our efforts towards economic development and the eradication of poverty. But it seems that wherever human beings exist, there are always some problems or differences and wars. But I quite optimistic that we will achieve peace in our lifetime.
Sophie Mukwena, SABC News, Johannesburg.